Okay, so quickly, let me walk you through some of the stuff that I think is given the context of when the prophet emerged, just how remarkable it is how Gibran shaped his vision in this poem, in this series of poems, but really a narrative poem. Uh, Turn of the 20th century, World War One shattered Europe and shattered the rest of the world. And more than just the physical dismantling of the previous world order, the nation states of Europe shattered, the Ottoman Empire shattered, we see a psychological shattering because people suddenly, the sort of uncertainty that Arnold is talking about in Dover Beach as sort of a philosophical, hypothetical, gee, it's kind of hard to make sense of the world anymore. The world's suddenly completely upside down. So the world is reinforcing to people of that mindset that it makes no sense at all anymore. And I'm going to walk you through how this shapes art. Because, well, not just with Gibran an artist, and I'll talk a little bit more. I have a few things I want to say about that I hope to do in another brief vlog later on. But just it changes how the artist deals with the world. And these are 19th century realist paintings followed by a piece of Dada art. The landscape, the city, right? Pre-World War I landscape, post-World War I cityscape. And we see this shattering of image progressing through other artistic movements, even where we see quasi-realistic forms coming back in the surrealist movement. They're depicted in this. It's a depiction of the unsettling subconscious of the artist rather than a celebration of the outside world. So we see the images shattering. We see the same shattering of narrative taking place in the writing of the period. And I especially want to focus on Eliot because where the lights came on and what got my train of thought arguably derailed to go down this route when I started thinking about what I wanted to say about the prophet was realizing The Wasteland was published the year before the prophet. So Gibran and Eliot are contemporaries, living in the same world, looking at the same world, but shaping their understanding of that world very differently. The poem that was published right before the prophet was Eliot's really arguably his masterpiece, or at least one of his better known long poems, The Wasteland. With a title like The Wasteland, you already know it's going to be really an upbeat, happy, lyrical poem. Haha. It begins in a really interesting way. This is a frame from the Canterbury Tales, which it's going to sound like a non sequitur, and that's my middle name, non sequitur. It's actually George. But Canterbury Tales is a celebration of kind of the height of medieval British civilization, and it's really, although a lot of time has passed between the Canterbury Tales and the 19th century and the world that is shattered by World War I, this is still very much a part of how Europe viewed itself. And when you read The Wasteland, you're going to see that The Wasteland draws together images, many of them coming from this far back in European history. But The Wasteland draws together all sorts of references to bits and pieces of primarily European civilization. But this is where how the Canterbury Tales begins. It's in Middle English poem. So in Middle English, it's Juan that April with her shoulders suit, the drought of March had passed to the root, invaded every vine and such liqueur of Macbeth to engender is the floor, and Zephyros ake with his sweet breath and spread hath in every host and hath the tender crops, and the young sun hath in the ramis have of course he run, and smally foolish mocking melodia that sleep in all the night with open air, so pricketh him nature in their courages. And here's the translation of that. And I'm using an iPad, so sound's going to be ashamed of me, but I don't have the English version of this here at home. When April's gentle rains have pierced the drought of March to the root, and bathed each sprout through every vein with liquid of such power it brings forth the engendering of the flower, when Zephyrus, the gentle breeze, Zephyrus too with his sweet breath, has blown through every field and forest, urging on the tender shoots. And there's a youthful sun, his second half course through the ram now run. This is where the reference to the zodiac in that time, the position of the sun in that time of year. And little birds are making melody and sleep all night, eyes open as can be, so pricks them nature in each little heart. This is spring. This is the spring of the Canterbury Tales. It is a celebration of life, and what marks spring is the return of life, and life is so vibrant that even the small birds can't sleep at night. Let me just pull up the Wasteland, and I'll read the very beginning of that. And Eliot very consciously modeled the beginning of the Wasteland on the opening of the Canterbury Tales, but the contrast, I think, really gets at what has happened in the interim, how Eliot sees his world as having been shattered. And yes, I'm covering while the Wasteland is opening up on my iPad, which I've just updated to the new operating system, and nothing's working anymore. So here's how the Wasteland begins. And the title of the first section of the Wasteland is called The Burial of the Dead. So that already tells you where he's going. So instead of when April with her sweet showers, here's where we begin. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. So what is April? What is spring? The return of life isn't a good thing. It's a stirring of memory. It's a dredging up of things better left forgotten. April is the cruelest month. And there you have the shattering of the worldview of the early 20th century embodied in The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. It's a very interesting book. Karen Armstrong, who it carries on a lot of the work of Joseph Campbell, who wrote Hero with a Thousand Faces, and there's a series of interviews that PBS did, I think Bill Moyers did with him, called The Power of Myth. Karen Armstrong carries on a lot of that work, and a lot of us are familiar with her. In A Short History of Myth, she argues that the stories of ancient times, and she sees Christianity, Judaism, and Islam as kind of representing manifestations of those stories of ancient times, helped people live a certain connection with the transcendent. Right? So we not only told stories, but we embodied them in our lives, and we even included rituals in our lives that reenacted some of those stories that were really heartfelt rituals that gave us a sincere connection, a genuine connection to the transcendent, to the ineffable, to the divine. And she argues that as Christianity has receded, as so much of the world has lost faith, it's the role of the artist to step in and recreate stories that will connect us back to that sense of what in the world goes beyond the world. And this is a digression I almost made earlier that I stopped myself from making, but J.R.R. Tolkien is very consciously engaged on this myth making when he creates the world of the Lord of the Rings. And if we dive into one of those books later on in the book club, I'll be really excited to talk about that. I would argue Gibran is doing much the same thing in The Prophet. Read The Wasteland and then read The Prophet, and you're going to see just how much Gibran has tapped into the wealth and the richness of the traditions which inspired him, the biblical tradition, the Islamic tradition, and woven together what is a beautiful meditation on the nature of reality. And even though there are things that he may get wrong in there, it is a reaffirmation of the power and of seeing the world in a holistic way, with meaning that distinguishes it from the world of Dover Beach, in which the sea of faith is withdrawn and we can only live in a world of ignorant armies clashing at night, and the world of the prophet. And I think these two images, of course, are a beautiful contrast to me. And this, by the way, is a still image. There is apparently a movie version of the prophet either in production or out. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So that's really where I wanted to take us with this brief intro. It went longer than I wanted to. But think about that. As you read the prophet, think about the chaos of the world into which this book emerged, and the power of the poet to try to make sense of that chaotic world, as opposed to the power of the poet to succumb to that chaos of that world, or at least reflect that chaos rather than set out and do battle with it. So that is the end of my first vlog. Saad will probably not give me a chance to do a second. It went on so long and it rambled so much. But this is what I was thinking about as I reread the prophet again after a very, very long time.